All right, is that any better, guys?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I started the Facebook Live and it did something to my audio, but welcome everyone and good morning. Thank you for joining us for our August meetup for the Community Entrepreneurship Hour. For anybody who's joining in new, my name is Dia Ghosh with the A to Jobs Foundation. And traditionally on this call, we have, featured early stage entrepreneurs to kind of pitch and get feedback on their business ideas as they're growing. But this month, we actually have two experienced entrepreneurs, and we're really excited because both of them have rural backgrounds as tech entrepreneurs, and they also happen to be veteran entrepreneurs. So a lot of cool things happening. But I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today, Michael Morford. Michael, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. So Michael is the co-founder of Sustainable Technologies Incorporation. Sustainable Technologies is an online software platform that efficiently connects the fragmented ecosystem of the US manufacturing industry with large-scale buyers to enable sufficient, secure, onshore America First supplier networks. I'll add the link to their company in the chat here. And as I mentioned, Michael is also a former US Army captain and disabled veteran of the Iraqi War. So Michael, thank you for your service. And with that, there's a big bio that I can read out, but I'd like for Michael to share his story to you all. So thanks again, Michael, for joining, and the platform's yours.
Great. Hey, I really appreciate you guys inviting me to be on. I will try to be fast and furious and respect my time so that I'm not bleeding into Tony's opportunity to speak. Ironically, Tony may not remember, but when I first came up with this software, the architecture of the software, our mutual friend, Tom Wavering, actually put me in touch with Tony. So we'd swapped a couple emails, but I've never had a chance to actually sit down face to face. My background very quickly, I grew up in a super small town north of Enid. So Ada is like a very large city in my mind. And so if anyone ever tells me they're from a small town, I always challenge them, because Burlington, Oklahoma, my class had a graduating class of 11. So it's great to be talking to one of the major metropolitan areas in the state. After the farm, I went, obviously through Tulane University Engineering School, got commissioned as a Army officer. And then over the next 15 years, that was jumping between a career as an investment banker, as well as my being an either reserve officer or active duty officer, to include, helping put together the strategy on the logistics side on how we would go deploy forces for what eventually became the 2003 Iraqi invasion. A few years ago, after my military career had come to a conclusion, and I was pretty sick and tired of Wall Street and just how dirty you feel every day after talking to some pretty self-loathing individuals when it comes to human beings, I finally said I've got to reinvent myself and try to do something useful with my time. That led me towards a series of conversations and pulling on sweater threads of ideas that eventually led to this concept of what is called sustainment, and what we like to say is a technology platform. We definitely try to stay away from basic words such as a database or a network, because it's much broader in terms of our longer concepts there. So with that, if I have the ability to share screen, Dia, I'm going to flip through a few slides very quickly. I'll probably go through them faster than some people would prefer, but I'd rather get to the important part, which is actually discussing and answering questions. So what we are essentially creating is a true platform. It's an ecosystem, and the goal of this, why am I not, here we are. The goal is to really go about changing the way we do the way the U.S. does manufacturing. We are trying to influence the reshoring of American manufacturing as best we can. We are technically headquartered in Duncan. I am in Oklahoma City every week. I physically live in Frisco, Texas. which is more a function of my wife and her and our three little children. We are just around the corner from my mother-in-law, and that's actually a blessing, not a curse. So I'm not moving away from free babysitting anytime soon. But needless to say, the where we're heading is trying to solve this problem here, which is we obviously have a U.S. manufacturing base that has just been whittled away in terms of resiliency over the past 30 plus years, as larger multinational corporations and U.S. companies have sought to squeeze pennies any way they can in the supply chain. And you wake up 30 years later and we are facing obviously a very fragile, poor U.S. manufacturing base that oftentimes cannot support the U.S. needs in an event of crisis. And we witnessed that obviously with COVID-19, the pandemic. Then we saw it again with that Suez Canal tanker blockage, and in Texas when that ice storm hit in February. That obviously was another good example of how fragile our supply chain is. And when it comes to the manufacturing sector, one of the most staggering statistics that we have come across is, and I believe it because I am constantly walking through machine shops and talking to machine shop owners, is at any given point in time, 75% of our U.S. manufacturing equipment is sitting idle. And so essentially you have this enormous amount of spare capacity that people who run those machines are small business owners that may or may not have a website. They've only, say, built parts for the oil field and don't know really how to diversify into a different sector, who don't have time to really go out and look for new business. And so we're trying to solve for that problem. We are trying to help bring the U.S. manufacturing base into more modern days by bringing up the small to medium-sized manufacturing enterprise. At the same time, that goal is to basically improve the defense industrial base. Although we aren't necessarily a defense company, my co-founder, myself, the chairman of our board, pretty chapter company, are former Army officers. And in our minds, the defense industrial base is the weakest it's been in history. We are often left with still going overseas for parts to go on U.S. Air Force fighter jets and long-range bombers. And if we can solve for this problem, it will essentially solve for improving the weakened defense industrial base. That if you go to Senate websites, White House websites, and different government websites, you'll find a depressing amount of reports that show just how fragile that base of manufacturing is. So where we're going with this is this idea of a flywheel. We've seen a lot of companies say that they're going to somehow improve manufacturing. To their credit, it's the right intentions at heart, but the reality is that they're just creating some sort of very simplistic database where they claim that they've created a marketplace so that buyers and sellers can engage, and it's the next eBay or Amazon. And in reality, it's just people putting basic information into a database. And, that's pretty much the extent of it. If you go to even some of the largest organizations, such as the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM.org, and you go to their marketplace, there'll just be a smattering of companies that have just their basic corporate information there. And that's about the extent of what you can do with them. And that's historically been what companies have tried to do to somehow address this issue. What we're creating is, we like to say, this flywheel, a platform in which we have every single person that is engaged in the manufacturing sector involved in this sustainment platform. And we're going to do that by creating tools and incentives within the platform so that that individual, that stakeholder, will want to be on that platform. And at that point in time, you then have current relevant data that can then be used for analytics and a true level of networking workplace environment. So depending upon the stakeholder and that persona creates an entirely unique user experience. So for the government and commercial sourcing side, the left-hand side of our flywheel, those are large procurement teams, groups of contracting officers in the Air Force at Tinker Air Force Base, or large groups within ExxonMobil, and they are constantly looking at their supply chain and constantly in the process of purchasing large amounts of manufactured goods. Their experience is a lot of workflow automation. It is a lot of ways to help illuminate their supply chain. And that's the sort of experience we're creating for them so that they are on that platform. In fact, heretofore, most of our funding has come from the U.S. Air Force, initially with a SBIR Phase 1 and then an SBIR Phase 2, which Tony can speak to about better than I can. But that has since led to multiple follow-on contracts in which we're now engaged at various levels in the DoD up to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, as they start to see the potential utility value of what this can do for their own logistics supply chain management. On the economic development side, that's a piece that people forget. So between your Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance, the people at the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, your local professional technical assistance centers, the Oklahoma Small Business Development Center, you have so many people, the ADA Economic Development Center, so many people whose job it is to create economic growth, whom we need to create an experience so they can do their job by being engaged in the platform. And then lastly is that experience that you would see with the manufacturer. A lot of times these are guys that are women that do not have a website. They're just a smaller company. That 90% of the manufacturers left in the US are small companies. So what is their user experience look like? So I wanted to stop down and spend quite a bit of time on this particular slide to give you that vision, and I'll now kind of trudge through pretty quickly because we have different names for each product. The blueprint is what is provided to the economic development professionals. This is a paid product. So the way we look at it is we need to always make this free for the manufacturer. We need to always make this an easily accessible tool for them because it's their information, their available capacity, their existing machines. That is the information that we need to have accurate, relevant, current, so that all these other user experiences have value in them. So this is Blueprint, which is for your economic development teams, for your state economic development teams, all the way down to the local city groups. Obviously, we have not actually presented this to ADA, but I'm going to be circling back to show them what this looks like. We are talking with the entire state of Texas, Corpus Christi, Austin, the Dallas, multiple municipalities in Dallas-Fort Worth, and when they see the different tools that this thing can do, it's pretty cool. Versus this manufacturer's portal, which we're creating to have a look and feel of a LinkedIn experience. And so we like to, when we have 30 seconds to talk about this, we often say, hey, we're essentially creating a LinkedIn meets Airbnb meets Google for manufacturing. And it's much more than that, but at least that gets the point across for especially this portal experience, which I'll show in a second. The supply chain is more about automated workflows, algorithms that you can tweak the filters so that when they're doing specific searches for needs, the relevant answers rise to the top. Obviously, cybersecurity, how to message, how to send critical technical data between them and their suppliers is important. So that's where we populate unique experiences for them. We are heading on, this is step one of 1,000 steps. So we have a roadmap that really could take us the next 10 years as we develop each series of features and functionalities that each of these user experiences would want in their platform. I'm going to skip through these pretty quickly. I will provide this slide deck so that everyone can look through this after the fact if they want, and they can always come back to me. Any questions, email, text, it's very easy, and I would be more than happy to explain some of the deeper architectural design or our own experiences, any questions that you may have. And this is a part that is kind of exciting that I'm focused on personally at the moment, and that is the workforce development piece. It's not currently in our platform, but in fact, I have lunch tomorrow with the Oklahoma Labor Commissioner. I had a meeting just last week with the director I'm looking at his business card, the director of the Oklahoma Office of Workforce Development. So we think we have figured out ways to layer some of this technology into their needs And because they are just as critical in this ecosystem as the actual guy manning that CNC 3-axis mill. So this is a great example of where we want to continue to move into the future. This is more of a slide that our biz dev gentleman uses when he talks about how we get engaged with this technology. So I'm going to stop on that slide deck. I'll provide that later, but I wanted to quickly show you, this is just version 1 that launched here in the last few weeks of that user experience for the manufacturer. And so it would be, we're actually making this even cleaner. I'm pretty excited about where this is going. But basically we are, let's see if I can toggle down here. I can't, I wonder, oh, there we are. Well, needless to say, so this is how they would enter in their information to be seen by the public and hopefully be found by sourcing groups. If they wanted to look for opportunities, this is just the beginning of what we've already identified as 20 separate different opportunities just within the Department of Defense alone. More importantly, we are working with some of the larger prime defense contractors, and hopefully we're then diversifying out of just the DoD and into ag equipment, oil field services equipment, more commercial aerospace. We want to provide opportunities to that small business easily for any sector that they want to pursue. When you go into, say, DLA Dibs, that is a website that is a very cumbersome website. We try to make it much more user-friendly interface. And then on, say, for the Discover side, we'll clear filters, see what we come up with. Hopefully my website isn't too slow. There we go. And so this is essentially where it's almost like a Zillow sort of experience. Depending on what company you want to look at, you can pop up the basic card. Clearly this company exists. We have found them through our multiple data sets. They have not claimed their profile to populate it with the additional information, so we want them to. But we at least have enough basic information because they have a cage code. They have registered into some database within the federal government. Whereas if we go to up to Tulsa or even down to Duncan, Oklahoma, where there's more companies here, we will see VertiPrime, which is the company that I'm representing on this website. And this has slightly more information, not a whole lot more. If you go up to Tulsa, when you start to add basic filters, let's say that we want to go after just coatings and finishings, which is a much more specific niche process that is needed within the manufacturing space. You'll see that currently there's really none in Southwest Oklahoma, at least that we've identified. We hope to identify every possible source there is when it comes to that. We are confident that currently, believe it or not, we have about 85% of all manufacturing companies in Oklahoma already on the source or on this site. We are moving towards what our anticipated expectations are, that next year we'll have 20,000 different companies with the basic amounts of information. But where we really want to go is for these companies to come on and take ownership of that profile so that then they add more information in to more easily be found, so that when the Department of Defense or John Deere is doing searches using this tool, they rise to the top. So I blew through an awful lot. I'm going to stop share because I'd much more rather get to just questions and not soak up too much time and screw Tony. And so if anyone would like to ask me anything, I'm an open book.
Well, Michael, I can go ahead and kick it off. And if anyone has a question, raise your hand, jump in, but might get the conversation started. So I love the story about how you graduated in a class of 11 and went on to have a long career, both in the military and as a civilian. But I'm curious about, where did you gain the knowledge and the skill to develop this kind of digital technology? You know, where did you gain the experience? How did that come about?
I am not a dev. We have a team of 15 developers and data scientists. I am not that skilled in the tech world. I literally spend enough time just reading and asking questions and networking. Joe Allen, for example, who's a 20-year IT consultant, there in the DFW area who was employee number one. I just started asking him, hey, here's these ideas in my head, and is it technically feasible? And he would listen and say, yes, you would start with a JSON backend API. And I'm like, what's JSON and an API? And, so it just was a very slow, tedious path of a learning curve. And I knew I just needed to understand it enough to be able to explain it to people such as the Department of Defense, and to then be able to turn around and find the right people to hire. So that's kind of how I went about doing this. And I quickly realized it would be a waste of time for me to do one line of code, because it would take me 5 hours to do that one line of code, whereas we can hire teams domestically. My goal is for us to be developing as we grow our dev team to be focused in Oklahoma. I really want this to be an Oklahoma success story, even if this is towards the national footprint.
What is the percentage of military contractor businesses here in Oklahoma versus, say, Virginia? And why would you pick Oklahoma versus Virginia?
Because I'm an Okie and I'm biased. Oklahoma, because of its massive presence in the aerospace defense industry, it's the second largest economic engine for the state. I knew who to go to at the state level to just have these conversations. So it was almost it was a fortuitous situation, because Oklahoma is small enough that you can get your arms around it, unlike, say, a Texas or an Ohio, Florida. So that was ideal. It also was perfect because you had multiple branches, most importantly for this purpose, Tinker Air Force Base, the largest military depot in the world, sitting right in Oklahoma. So you had all of the key stakeholders that you would want out of a state, easy to reach and there. So for example, we are talking with the state of Wyoming because they want to deploy this blueprint product for their economic developers, and they have like 10 manufacturers. So, the fact that this is a legacy state when it comes to oil and gas, there is per capita a lot more manufacturing companies and machinists than you will find in almost any other state. So it was a stroke of luck that my great grandparents settled in Oklahoma, and decades later I happened to be here with an idea, and it was the right state. So it was biased, but it was also actually a great opportunity, because Oklahoma is the perfect case study.
Michael, Tony here. I do remember you. I think we spoke on the phone, and then I went back and looked at our emails. It looks like Erica Lucas initially connected us, and then Tom.
That's right.
But then I love the SBI. I was looking back at your phase 1 and phase 2, and it sounds like you're continuing to move forward. So that's super awesome. So it's good to see. We'll have to catch up on a side note.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the manufacturers. It's free for them to kind of list or claim their listing, or so does that mean your customer is actually the state or the DoD, or who's actually, like, how do you make your money, I guess is my question.
Yeah. So the large purchasing organizations are primarily going to be the ones footing the bill, along with, on a lesser cost price, your economic development groups. So we are on contract with the Oklahoma Department of Commerce within their aerospace defense division. And so they're, it's a smaller dollar amount, but when you aggregate all of the local, regional, state economic development groups, that becomes material mathematically very fast. And when it comes to the federal government, not to use superlatives, but then you get into the hundreds of millions of dollars that they are more than happy to pay, because just in Tinker alone, then this is their data, not ours. The speed at which their contracting people can now identify the right manufacturer for a specific part, they estimate will save them and their group 1 million man hours a year. And so extrapolate that across all the branches and across the country, and you suddenly are dealing in the billions of dollars of cost saves. And so the idea that it would be, in aggregate, a few tens of millions of dollars for them is nothing. So those will be the places that really are helping pay for this. we looked at a lot of companies that are trying to quote unquote help manufacturers, and it's a pay to play. And these guys don't have the money to do that necessarily, nor the time. And we felt like a lot of them are almost predatory, because it's just the classic, reel them in and get them on some sort of subscription contract. They are not the ones that have the monies to do that, and they shouldn't, because they're the ones that have been left for dead by 30 years of globalization of the supply chain. So we're trying to invert that business model. And I saw a question regarding a manufacturing portal. So that is a company out of Utah. They have a database. It is a nice little product that is actually put on contract by the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance. But because they are partially funded by the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, it got good publicity out of them. It's really not a competitor for us because of the massive amounts of back-end algorithms, various data sets that we are pulling from, the workflow solutions and the algorithms embedded. I haven't even gotten into the really exciting artificial intelligence parts that we are working on with University of Oklahoma and Ohio State, in which we're going towards a point in time in which the AI can look at a CAD CAM file, identify every specific process and machine that needs to be made to make that part, and then match it against not a company, but the specific machines out there that have available capacity. So where we're heading is significantly different than this basic product that the manufacturing portal is, which is very much just almost like an online catalog to, list your company.
Will the companies be ranked by their utility or their rating for what they're
Right.
good at?
No. So part of it is the small business. So especially on the DoD side, the algorithms will pull a smaller business or a business that is woman-owned, minority-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned. Those will have higher weightings. Those weightings can be influenced by the organization that's doing the search, so that it's not our bias. It's their specific constructs that they tweak their search for. Whether or not a company has claimed their profile versus if we just have found a lot of information through our data filters on them, will have no bearing on the rankings that their search comes up, because we don't want to be in the business of picking companies. We want to be in the business of just helping others find their needs.
We have maybe time for one more question. And anybody has a question you would like to ask Michael? All right, well, with that, I'm sure if there's any follow-up questions or you think of something later, Michael, if it's okay, we'll share your email and LinkedIn with everyone on the group. Thank you so much again for joining us today and for your presentation. Can we please get a round of applause for Michael and the great work he's doing?
Oh, snap. So real quick, yes, anyone feel free to email me. I'll send the presentation out so that everyone can have it. I'm actually in Midwest City, walking back down the stairs to this large event called Tinker and the Primes. So unfortunately, I can't stick around to hear Tony's remarks. But Tony, let's circle back. I'd love to catch up. And thanks everyone for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
See you, Michael.
Bye. Later.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to introduce the second half of the agenda today. And it seems like we have a theme today, which is really exciting, and love to see the collaboration between entrepreneurs here in Oklahoma. I think that's something that makes Oklahoma so unique. So Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. And I will quickly introduce you and then hand it over to you. So Tony Whedon is the founder of Base Connect. Base Connect creates cutting-edge software applications built for military operators by military operators. They connect troops, communities, and and businesses to save lives, time, and resources. Tony grew up in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and joined the Air Force after attending college at Oklahoma Christian University. After 13 years of service, Tony left the Air Force to help solve big problems for the DoD using technology. And with that, Tony, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a great intro. I don't have to say where I'm from or anything. So I look like I'm 12 years old, but I'm going to hit the big 4-0 this year. I have 4 kids and a wife of almost 19 years. And, it was a big leap of faith jumping out of the Air Force. All my buddies thought I was crazy. I'm 7 years away from the quote unquote retirement. That's kind of the carrot there. And I guess just a little of my story is in the Air Force. It's funny, I ended up taking a personality test after I got out of the Air Force. And a direct quote when you print off the thing and it says about it, it says, "This personality is not compatible with military service." And then it specifically said, basically, in my own words, you'll beat your head against the wall the entire time and you won't be able to make changes. And so obviously I took that personality test after I got out of the Air Force, but it was quite funny because that's exactly what happened, is that the whole time I'm wanting to make change in a structure that doesn't allow it, or it's very, very slow to change. And now here I am still working with the DoD, but I'm making a bigger impact outside of the Air Force than I felt like I was on the inside. You asked a question, I think, about technology, and I'll just kind of answer it. I am not a coder. I've built websites and I've learned a lot of things, but I'm not like a computer science major. I don't have a degree in that. I'm very much just a problem solver and an entrepreneur at heart. I was the kid that was organizing the, you probably see him on the side of the road with a snow cone stand, right? And I got my buddy dressed up in a clown suit, and it's like, hey, pull over here and buy a snow cone from us. I'm the one that had like a lawn mowing business, and I was always doing some sort of entrepreneurial venture, even in from a young age, and then through college. My major at Oklahoma Christian, it's a different term now than it was back then, but back then it was called liberal studies. It's totally different than what liberal means today, right? But it would almost be like an entrepreneurial. I blew my mind. I got to pick 3 different areas, and then I got to take any classes in those areas. I just had to have a certain number of upper level division classes and lower level division classes. And so, I did public speaking and communications and history and Bible and website design and macromedia flash animation. And then I was a radio DJ all 4 years of college on 88.9 KYLV, Oklahoma City. So I got to do just a plethora of random things, all because I wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force, right? So I guess today I wanted to push across that, I don't know who's on the call. I don't know you guys very well. I've gotten to know Dia a little bit, and then I've met Jim in person. We got to chat. But sometimes we're in a transition of like, should I do it? Should I not? I'm not really qualified. I say sometimes that we just pulled a Nike and we just did it. Like, it just came down to taking a leap of faith. That's really my faith is a big thing to me. My faith in my family, and then my friends kind of coming next. And so my wife and I sat down and prayed about it. I was facing a 6-month deployment right when my 4th child was going to be born. And I had dabbled a little bit in software development. I found kind of an open source platform and had built a mobile application at Hurlburt Field down in Florida. And this is kind of leading into how Base Connect started. And that was to solve a problem. The Air Force said, you know what, we don't have enough money to keep operators employed. And so they got rid of all the operators. Well, we didn't even have a phone directory. We would call 0 and they would connect us to any phone number on base. And that's how we did it for years and years. And so now all of a sudden you would dial 0 and there was nothing, right? There's nobody there. There's no one to answer your calls. There's no one to connect you. So you're trying to find phone numbers. And I was going into a meeting working with the wing commander, and the vice wing commander pulled me aside and said, hey, do you know anything about mobile apps? And I said, well, I have about 10 mobile apps on the App Store. Again, I'm not a software developer, guys. So like I literally, a lot of them were open source platforms. What he was like, well, hey, the wing commander wants to build this app and he'd like to, talk about the mission and the vision and the goals. And the first thing my mind went to is fly, fight, and win. Like you don't need a mobile app for that. That doesn't solve a problem. So I think the first thing, if you're learning anything, is just do it. And the second thing is solve a problem. So like if you can solve a problem and then take just the leap of faith to do it, you're 90% there, right? Then it just comes down to actually doing it. So in this case, I was like, you don't need an app. Fly, fight, and win. That's the mission, vision, goals of the Air Force. But my mind went to what problem could I solve right now? So then I said, well, hey, sir, yeah, we could put mission, vision, goals in there, but we kind of already know what those are. What if we put a phone directory, of the entire base? And I could just click and I would know what time the bowling alley is open, or I could call the 15th SOS, or whatever phone number. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's a good idea. I was like, and then like, what is going on? Like, we could put events and there are things that are going on base. And that just kind of turned into what he didn't know is I just went to the church app that we had built for our church and I just cloned it in the software. And then I just changed all the logos around. We already had a phone directory. We already had events. We already and I just made it, look like the first special operations wing. And that was in 2013. Well, 15,000 downloads later, I mean, I started getting emails personally saying, hey, would you build our military installation? Hickam, would you build us an app? Vance, would you build us an app? Tinker, would you build us an app? And I'm getting these personal emails. If you guys don't know, the Department of Defense, they don't care anything about your tax dollars. They will waste every dime that you give to them. And so that bothered me, like stewardship wise. And I was like, the DoD will build 499 apps, one for every single base. They'll spend $1 bajillion on each one of them, and they'll all be terrible. And then you'll have to download something new, and you'll have to learn something new every place that you go. And so I said, no, I will not build you an app for your base. However, I will build one app for the entire DoD. And so that slowly progressed. Like in 2013, if you fast forward 4 years later, like I said, I got the tag with a 6-month deployment right where our 4th child was gonna be born. And I just could not do it to my wife anymore. We had struggled with postpartum depression and just having kids in general, and I just couldn't do it. And so took this big leap of faith. I started working Base Connect. I did a business plan competition through Autry Technology, and ended up, I won that and got like free rent for a year. So now I had an office space, which is great. I couldn't really pay myself really anything, starting. So I needed to go out and start raising some funds. And so I raised a little bit of funds, but not enough to really go full time with Base Connect. So what I ended up doing is I was a pilot for a family that I was like their chief pilot. So I would fly them different places. I flew for about, between 10 and 15 days out of the month. I would be flying them someplace for business or whatever. There's 3 different families that own the aircraft. And then Michael kind of hinted at it a little bit, is the Thunder Launchpad. If you guys are ever interested in kind of technology stuff, they do a really good kind of incubator, accelerator type program that they're still doing. And I went through that program, and I had heard about SBIR, but they had an SBIR kind of expert that came in and spoke about everything. And so I was like, man, I'm going to go to this, and this is going to be cool. They're talking about, startup funding. And then I start the SBIR process. And like the week before I started the application, they got hacked or something. And in that process, they instead of, you would think innovating at that point, like figuring out more security or building a better system, right? No, they said, we're stopping all digital applications, and you have to mail physically an application in to this, to get your cage code and all these GSA advantage, all those different things that you had to kind of like, and I don't remember everything it is right now off the top of my head. I have kind of a list of it now. So I had to literally print off a PDF or a paper, like I got digital form, which is just driving us around trying to start a software company. I have to print off this paper form. I have to hand fill it all out. And then I have to physically mail it to them And then I'm envisioning in my mind, how many other thousands of companies are doing this, right? And then I know there's some government contractor that will like, I'm only going to work from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and then I'm out the door. And they probably have stacks and stacks and stacks of all these paper and like, and it was like thick, right? And it was like 25 pages or something ridiculous. And they're probably having to manually type all that in, right? Because they got rid of this process that actually was working. And so long story short, I couldn't actually apply for an SBIR because you had to have this cage code. And so wildly enough, like it took like 6 months before I finally got an email from them that said, hey, now you've been approved in the system and now you can log in to, this specific website. I think it's sam.gov. I want to say is the name of the website. And then now you can fill all the actual electronic stuff out and blah, 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 right? So in that process, I was kind of like, well, I don't know if this SBIR thing is for me. Michael had mentioned Tom Wavering. He's been a great kind of SBIR mentor. He's the one that really pushed me over the edge. And I had a buddy, from the Air Force call me out of nowhere. And he just said, hey, I just came to this event and they're starting this thing called AFWorks. And he's like, have you heard of SBIR? And of course, I'm like, yeah, I've heard of SBIR. It was in my mind, it's like this terrible thing, right? It took 6 months to even get through step one. And he goes, well, I know they're trying to work on the processes of that, but they have this new idea that's basically you can just submit any topic. And he's like, I know you have like so many ideas and you're working on Base Connect. And he's like, I think you should look at it. So he sent me this website. So I looked at it and then I called Tom Wavering and I just said, hey, and wildly enough, kind of providentially at that moment, I get an email that was like, hey, you've been approved to, sam.gov. And I'd been waiting like 6 months, right? So I was like, well, maybe I should apply for this, SBIR thing. So I started looking and I called Tom and basically he just said, Tony, like, you're never going to get it unless you put your name in the hat. And he's like, I know it's a painful process and I'll walk you through it the best that I can. And so that's what I did. There was it was called Open Topic. And for those, is there anybody here that knows what SBIR is? Just raise your hand if you've heard of it or you know what it is. Okay, so a couple. Is there anybody that has no clue what I'm talking about? That you're like, what is SBIR? I've never heard of this before. All right, so at least one. Anybody else? Two? All right, so to two or three of you, there's some of the cameras aren't on. So a couple of you have never heard of SBIR. So from a startup perspective, SBIR, you can think of it kind of like free seed funding that the government gives you. Now you earn it through the painful paperwork process, right? I'll tell you that, you definitely earn it. But it stands for Small Business Innovation Research. They set aside almost $3 billion, that's with a B, $3 billion for innovation. A great concept and idea that came through the SBIR, and STTR is the same type process. It's just TTR, normally you're partnering with like a college or a university to do science and technology research, where SBIR is more small business innovation research. So it's a little bit different, but kind of similar, but you'll hear those together sometimes, SBIR, STTR kind of, and it's the same type program. But an example of a traditional topic would be like the Air Force says, hey, I want to build a robot that like cleans my hangar. So I don't have to sweep the hangar anymore. We're paying, all these people every year to sweep our hangars. So we want to try and save that money. We want a robot that does it. And so companies, let's say their phase one let's say their budget is $10 million, right? I'm just throwing out numbers. You have no clue what their budget is, but let's just say phase one, they say, okay, well, we're going to select 10 companies and we're going to give them all $100,000 a piece. So that's $1 million of our $10 million. And they say, we're going to give them $100,000. Well, you kind of have two options in that phase one. You can literally just do research. And some people literally get $100,000 to write a research paper. I'm not kidding. Like they literally, all they do is research, they're writing a paper and that's all. And they're paying them to do that. You then compete for phase two. And that's where there's research and development together, right? So in that process, you go, well, hey, there's these other robot technologies. I think I could pair these together. I think I could build this, or maybe I am good at robotics or whatever it is. And then in phase two, they may select 2 or 3 or 4 companies, right? So they may say, okay, we spent $1 million. Now we're going to spend $4 million. We're going to select 4 companies and we're going to give all of you $1 million a piece. So now they've spent $5 million, right? And they go of their $10 million budget, we'll say, and they go, okay, let's see which of these companies actually builds a great product, right? And then they look at those products. They may buy all 4 of those if they're all amazing and try them out in different areas, or they may say all 4 of them are terrible and they don't buy any of them. But if they buy any of them, it is now considered a phase 3, which is what's called a direct sole source contract. So that means you don't have to go through, normally if you're doing any sort of business with the government, you hear the government goes with the lowest bidder, because they do. They put out like, hey, I need a widget, and whoever gives them the lowest number, that's pretty much who they go with almost every time. Well, in this phase, you bypass that. So they just buy it because they help fund it through the SBIR or STTR program. And when you hear me talk about robots, like the Roomba, if you've ever heard of the Roomba that goes around your house, that went through that process, right? So that's a great example of something that went through SBIR, STTR process. So for Base Connect, a little bit of a funny thing that happened initially when we were starting that I meant to mention earlier is originally we were called Facebook. We were going to get sued by this small company called Facebook, if you guys have ever heard of them. So we had to change our name to Base Connect. Honestly, it's been great for us to change our name. You know, the lawyers, I talked to 4 of them. I really wanted to be called Facebook because it instantly clicks in your mind what it is. And I was like, you know, decorated combat veteran gets sued by Facebook over name, right? I'm like, that's what the headline's going to say. And the lawyers are like, yeah, for one day. And then you're going to have this billion-dollar giant every day with these lawsuits, and you're going to be like crashing. I was like, perfect. Yeah, you're right. So Base Connect became the name. And what ended up happening is I already had Base Connect that I was starting to grow. Our initial business model was actually, you know, we listed every phone, you know, like partner with Advanced Air Force Base, for example. So we had their entire phone directory on there. We had stuff that was going on. We had every local business. So if you move to a new location, you type in dentist, doctor, lawyer, plumber, restaurant, whatever it is. You know, my wife, you know, I would be deployed. She would get a plumbing leak, and maybe we just moved to a new location. And she's like, I don't even know how to get the base, like much less who the best local plumber is. And so for her, she was like, it was great. You can just type in plumber and see, man, this guy's got 10 5-star reviews. He's military friendly, offers a discount. And those reviews are only viewable by our verified military audience, right? And we verified every person like coming in the platform. So we knew who was in the system. So you knew it wasn't fake Yelp reviews that someone paid for, or Google or Facebook or name your platform. And we all know that you can go to Fiverr.com and buy 100 reviews for whatever, right? So that's kind of, I'd already had the platform. I raised a little bit of like private capital with an angel investors here locally in Enid. And then I get that phone call. I end up getting an SBIR, and it was for a specific problem. And the problem that we were solving, and you guys will laugh, but still to this day, they're doing it. It's just so funny, except for the units that we're partnered with. If there was an emergency in the military, we called it a recall. Is there anybody in here who served in the military at all? Like raise your hand. Or family in the military, maybe. So one guy you served, Chris? Awesome, man. What branch are you in?
Army.
Awesome. What years?
2010 to 2015.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for your service. So you'll probably totally understand what I'm saying right now, because
I've been laughing the whole time.
You're laughing. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. It's epic, right? So
yeah.
And you'll love this problem. So in the Air Force, we call them recalls. I'm not sure what the Army calls them. They may call it the same, but it's basically where they needed to do 100% accountability, right? They use a lot of it for exercises, but if there was a tornado or a plane crash or an incident or an active shooter, and like, man, I need to get a hold of everybody in my unit and make sure everyone's accounted for and safe, right? They would do a recall. And literally, they would pull a book out or a piece of paper out of their pocket, and they would start on the list. And the commander would call the DO would call the ADOs would call the flight commanders would call everybody. And you're literally talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. So of course, technology, we just took that same process, put everyone's first name, last name, cell phone in there with tracking. Initially, it was just SMS. So they would send out a message. It would say, you know, Colonel, whoever is doing emergency recall, click here for the message. And they would click the link, which sent us back a tracking link to know they had opened the message. And then the message is right there. It also cut down on, you know, SMS, you can only do 160 characters, right? So you might need to tell them, hey, we're deploying. here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step, like there may be an entire checklist, and they can put that entire thing because it's opening a web browser on their phone. And so I remember the first commander, he had 160 people. And I was like, all right, sir, you're going to be the first big test. Like, are you ready to do this? Like, yeah. So he just says, test recall. This is a test message. You don't need to do anything. I just want to test the system. We're looking at using the Space Connect recall thing, right? Hit send, 160 people. Well, the first thing it goes to when you hit send is the analytics page. So he says, he sees sent to 160 people. And then you start seeing, read, acknowledged, and then you see unread, and then, not acknowledged. And then you see like percentage complete. And you're sitting there watching it 1%, 2%, 3%, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In like 30 seconds, like 75% of the squadron had already opened the message. So he's looking at like 90 people in like a minute. And he's like, that's 90 minutes that you just saved us of phone calls. Like if it was just a minute per phone call, and his mind was like just absolutely blown, right? So then you tear that out. We connected those together. Literally the president of the United States or the Department of Defense, like whoever at the highest level, could be the president, we give him access, could recall the entire Department of Defense, and it tiers all the way down. So you could see Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, Space Force, like he could just see percentages and then he could click into that. So the way we built it is all connected. And so we've been kind of grassroots, just going from base to base to base. And that got us our phase 1, then competed to phase 2. And then now our phase 3s are actually what they're doing is because we built that platform, kind of like Michael talked about before, is we have Base Connect platforms. Now they're like, hey, could you build this to solve this problem? Well, as long as it is in line with like Dia had said earlier, our vision is to save lives, save time, save resources for our troops, their families, and for the DoD as a whole. And so we filter that through. If it saves lives, save time, or save resources, and it can apply to the entire Department of Defense, then we put that on our backlog of features, right? But if it's like, hey, could you automate this Excel spreadsheet that 5 people use? We don't do that. So that's a little bit of the background, a little bit about SBIR. I also want to offer, I'll throw this in the chat here. I'm going to be doing a webinar on SBIR stuff here in the future. And so I'll throw in this link really fast. For if anybody's interested in SBIR and you want to be on the webinar, I'm just going to kind of do it. It's just totally free. I mean, it's purely just people have no clue what SBIR is. They don't realize there's so much federal dollars there. And so that's a little bit about Base Connect, where we've come, where we're going, what's going on, a little bit of background, some jokes about the DoD. And I'll leave this last time also for questions as well. So what questions does anyone have?
How are you going to solve the, I guess, the mental imbalance of a lot of Army leaders on the recall system? Because I know when I was in, it was, I have to see your face. I don't want to hear you on the phone. I don't want to, read that you got my text message. I need you at the company. We need to see that face.
Yeah, so some of that is in the messaging they send, right? One of the feedback that we got was that there, and it's in this latest version coming out, is before when you just open the message, it acknowledged the message, right? So it showed that it was acknowledged. Well, now we're realizing that like people may not actually read the message. They open it to acknowledge it, right? But they're not actually reading it. So now we have an actual button at the bottom that you have to actually acknowledge. So you have an open receipt and then you have an acknowledged receipt. And so in that, if commander needs to see you face to face, right, they'll put that in the message like, hey, we're recalling everyone. We're about to deploy. We need everyone from the battalion on the installation at this time, this date, whatever, right? And now they have an open receipt and then they have an acknowledged receipt. So that's a great question. To solve those issues, with technologies like these, our vision of the future is eventually we want everybody in the DoD on Base Connect, right? So in our features, like you heard me say, we started with directory, we started with local businesses, but now we have a secure news feed, we have a messenger, we have the recaller, like we have feedback stuff built inside the app. Like we have 65 features on our backlog, and they're not like, hey, can you change the font? It's like, hey, can we have like Uber for the military, right? Like, can we like, and so it's really big, like multi-million-dollar feature type things. And so we're envisioning that Base Connect will become the secure communication platform for the entire Department of Defense. And I'm using the word platform just like Michael, because there's so many different things that we want to connect with. Like even if you had an idea and let's say it's software related, but you don't want to deal with all the personal information, you just want the users to be able to use it. We want to partner with you guys to have like a login with Base Connect. So they're already a Base Connect user, they're already using that. So now they could just download your software. You have login with Base Connect. It connects to ours, kind of like, you know, when you log in with Facebook or something, right? It connects to Facebook to verify who you are. The same thing. Well, now you don't have to have all this PII on your server. It sends you a new unique identifier, maybe my first name, and now I can use your software without you having to go through all the BS of PII and IL4 and impact levels and FedRAMP and all this security stuff. You just build a cool piece of software that solves a problem. And so going back to answer your question about getting people in, I'm envisioning something like this, right? A Zoom for the DoD, whether it means we partner with Zoom or they're just pulling out Base Connect, and now you can physically see, you know, everyone if you need to. So that was kind of a long answer, Chris, but hopefully that answered it.
No, that was a perfect answer. My second question to that is, how do you secure the platform? You know, how do you make it basically almost blockchain, where, you know, those messages of, hey, we're deploying, you need to be here at this time, don't get hacked, don't get sent to people who are not in service anymore. You know, like we see, you know, people get out and then they'll get a message from their first sergeant, hey, there's a recall. Hey, I've been out for a year, man. You're not paying attention.
That has happened already, right? So
congratulations.
We've had people get messages that I'm no longer in the military, or I'm at a different base now, so please take me off this list, right? Type thing. So some of that, you know, is in. We'll start with security. So we're securely hosted in the government cloud, so the government owns all the data. So that's the first step. We're working through these what's called impact levels. I don't really want to go impact level 4. We may have to for like PII and FOUO, and the fight that I'm pushing back on is they're using Facebook and Gmail and WhatsApp and GroupMe and LinkedIn and Slack and name your whatever stuff, right? The majority of the free tools are monetizing you, like your personal data, right? So I bring it up and say, look, you guys are using Facebook, your commander posts on there all the time. I see it. Every terrorist in the world sees that, right? So until you say we're not going to use Facebook anymore, we are a secure platform, securely hosted in the GovCloud. And if you make us put more security thing in regards to like impact levels, one, there's going to be more funding that we need to do. But we're way more secure than posting to Facebook, right? And the more security you put on there, the more painful it is for a user. So an example is like one of the features we're building right now because of the recaller is you could kind of call it a reverse recaller, right? For an active shooter, anybody can run up and pull a fire alarm, right? So if anyone can go up and pull a fire alarm, why can't anyone pull out Base Connect and say emergency active shooter, and then it lets everybody on the whole base know there's an active shooter at that location, right? So then people can run or get away. And so if you think about it like that, imagine there is an active shooter, you're under your desk and they're like, oh crap, what's my 17-digit password? And you're like trying to type it in to get in to be able to send something or communicate, right? So there's like this fine line balance of, is it for official use only, FOUO? Is it PII data? And so we're in the throes of, I love the blockchain idea that you mentioned, because like I have this vision of trying to make it literally like unhackable. And where my vision goes to is storing the data, the user data on the phone itself, right? So maybe I have 150 people in the DoD saved on my phone, and that's overlapped to where you have 150 and there's, you know, 3.33 million people active guard reserve. So there's this plethora of backups that you literally, to steal all the data, would have to steal every single person's phone, because there would be duplicates. And this is just in our backlog of ideas, right? Have to work with really smart engineers to figure out how that would work. But I guess I'm not fully answering your question, but like it is a constant battle in regards to, normally if it's something FOUO, what we have them say is like, you know, check it in Base Connect. So now you have to be a user to be inside of Base Connect, especially the text message, right? Because anybody could forward that text message and open that. And so what we do is they just say, check in inside of Base Connect. So if it's FOUO and it's only for military, and they're concerned about that information getting out, someone out of the military. But also we're getting those processes better, in processing and out processing. And our hope is to eventually automate that. So security-wise, GovCloud, lots of ideas how to make it more secure, but hopefully they answer your question. Very good questions, though. I saw Jessica laughing pretty hard when I mentioned the DoD stuff. Do you have some experience with the DoD, or?
No, you're just a really good storyteller.
Oh,
And
thanks.
so I just enjoyed your humor and presentation.
Cool, thank you. Thank you. I tried not to use slides. My kids tell me they love me to tell stories, so I appreciate that. Thank you, it's good feedback.
Yes, I would second that. And we are at the hour, so I know people probably have questions. So similar to Michael, Tony, is it okay if we share your email and your LinkedIn in the follow-up if anybody has any questions?
Absolutely. I threw that link in there too. If you're interested in learning more about SBIR, I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'll also throw in this link really fast. If you're like super interested and you want to get started like literally like right away, let me send you the AFWorks. This is the best place to go. And then you're going to want to go to the SBIR area. Here we go, SBIR STTR. So here's the direct link. Like if you're like an action taker and you're just like, hey, I want to start right now. I don't want to wait on some crazy webinar that I don't even know the date yet. So there you go. So if you go to that link, you can learn. And this, I would say, is the best place to go because I mentioned the topics earlier, but this is an open topic. So you have an idea that works for the DoD and civilian world. That's what they're looking for. And they're open to anything. So it's not just like, hey, I have to build a robot that does this. It's like, hey, I have this cool idea, and they'll help you, go through the process and help fund that. Cool.
Awesome.
Well,
thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, Tony. Can we get a round of applause for Tony? Awesome. Thank you. And I'll also just add that Tom Wavering, who Michael and Tony both mentioned, helped us connect to these speakers today. And we are really grateful for that. And any kind of SBR related questions, reach out to the Oklahoma Catalyst program. They'll have answers to all of that. With that, thank you all so much for joining. We will be back again next month. Some of you might have caught this in the beginning. This is my last Community Entrepreneurship Hour with the 80 Jobs. So I'm sad to leave, but thank you all for being a part of this journey at 80 Jobs in some way. But we will be back next month. Jim and his team will be continuing it. So thank you all so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.